Hi, I'm Kristen Connolly. I'm the elected clerk recorder and registrar voters here in Contra Costa County. Over the next 2 months, high school students will be interviewing elected officials of their choice to learn more about their work. We hope you will enjoy this series we're calling Democracy Dialogues.
Hi, my name is Karlina Meyer, and I am an incoming junior at Carondelet High School from Walnut Creek, California. Today, I'm here to interview Susannah Meyer, who is a city council member in Brentwood. She also has numerous other experiences, including a community volunteer, school advocate, and head of her own nonprofit called Empowered Aging, which helps senior issues. I'm so happy to interview today, Susannah. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Karlina. It's nice to meet you, and thanks for the invitation.
So my first question for you is, can you tell me a little bit about your experience, both in the corporate world and as a school advocate, and then to volunteer, and eventually to the Brentwood City Council, and what your journey was like?
It's an interesting journey, actually, because I would never in a million years have imagined that I would ever be a vice mayor or on city council at all. It wasn't something that was in my plan or even something I ever thought about until COVID hit. But the nonprofit part of my work, that's always been something that's been very near and dear to my heart, and being involved in my community and volunteering and being about like room mom and volunteering at the school since my kids were young, all of that. Those are all things that have been part of who I've been and part of who I knew I was kind of from the beginning. The political part of it is new. The political part is something that's not, it's not a coat that fits me all the time, if you want to put it that way. I'm not a huge fan of politics, to be honest, because I really like straight talk, I like transparency, and I like communication, and I just want people to say who they are and where they are and just be honest with each other. And so sometimes that can be a bit of a challenge for me, but getting involved in politics actually happened because I wanted to do more to serve my community, and I wanted to help people through COVID and help people get connected to resources, that kind of thing.
Could you talk a little bit about why you are particularly interested in issues relating to seniors?
You know, it's my grandmother was always a huge influence in my life and a huge inspiration for me. And I think I've always been someone who doesn't care what your age is. I can be friends with anyone, and I sort of gravitated to people who have life experiences because I just love sitting and talking with someone and hearing their story. And I think older adults have so much to share and so much to benefit the communities they live in if we just sit and listen to them, if we sit and talk and give them time to share who they are and what they've gone through. And I think, in fact, thinking about history, I always felt like social studies classes in high school should include residents of local long-term care facilities, bringing into the classroom and teaching about their real life experiences. I think there's so much separation between generations now that doesn't need to be there. And I think people are too focused on age, frankly, when they should just be focused on the person.
For sure. And you mentioned that politics wasn't necessarily your cup of tea to begin with, but you do work in politics now. What aspects of government and policy and politics are your core values, I guess?
I think the biggest thing about being involved in politics is being able to raise voices. And I think as individuals, we all have the right to speak up at a city council meeting or a county supervisor's meeting or a Senate or assembly meeting, a hearing, and to make our thoughts and our opinions known and to advocate for ourselves. But when you're in elected office, you can help people who aren't necessarily comfortable in that role with raising their voices anyway. If someone reaches out to me and says, I really feel strongly about this situation in the city, but I'm not comfortable coming to speak at a meeting, I can potentially kind of advocate for them and help them understand that, that they have a right to speak and their voices do matter. And so that's, I guess, I think of things in those terms too, because of older adults, in fact, because there are a lot of people in our communities that don't feel like they have the right to be heard or the opportunity to be heard. And so that's been an important thing for me, is to try and help people that are normally overlooked, underregarded, underheard, to feel like they do matter and they can speak up and be heard. It's the same thing as on like I said, a county or a state level as well, that we do all have the right to be heard. And And if those of us who are comfortable in that role of speaking up can do that on behalf of others who are not, I think it's our responsibility to do that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really powerful, that you definitely stand for uplifting others' voices and advocating for those who are maybe a little bit more marginalized and can't stick up for themselves. So thank you. My next question is, when you took office, what surprised you most, whether that be about your actual day-to-day role or maybe just what it was like to be in a political setting?
Yeah, it is. It's definitely, I worked for the state Senate for 2.5 years, and in that role, I was watching council meetings in the district, part of the district that I covered, on a regular basis. So I thought I had a clear understanding about what happens. And of course I did when it comes to what you're seeing in the front, on the dais and the interactions with the public there. But the truth is, when you get up there, it is a very different thing, and the demands are different, and the sacrifices that you're making are different. The interactions with the public that either maybe don't understand what it is that you stand for or are unclear about how much power you actually do have, those things are all different. I think we see a lot of local control, that's a catchphrase, being taken away at the city level when it comes to housing and development. And my goal to stand for the residents of the city that I held office in doesn't change, but my ability to sometimes make votes about the things that are important to them can be very highly impacted by the state. So I think part of it was getting to understand exactly where our control stops and the state takes over. That's a kind of a big deal, actually.
So you mentioned that you are a council member in Brentwood, but you've also worked at the broader state level under Senator Steve Glazier. So what is your biggest concern for Brentwood individually and then for the broader county?
So for Brentwood, I would say affordable housing is huge, and I'll get into the county part of that as well. But in Brentwood, our housing has been, at one point we were the fastest growing city. So our housing is there. There's a lot of housing. There isn't a lot of affordable housing, and that's been a problem. And I really support the idea of inclusionary affordable housing, so that not every person who needs affordable housing is stuck in one high-rise apartment building in one area of town. I think it's more important for people to feel like they're all included in the community and they all have an equal place in it. And so inclusionary, of course, is going to mean that you have no idea if your next door neighbor paid market value or a lower amount for the house that they're living in. And I think that's for the sake of lifting people up and making sure people are feeling valued. I much prefer that kind of affordable housing. But the other part for Brentwood is that 80% of our residents are traveling at least 45 minutes each way to get to the jobs that can help them pay their bills and support their families. And so the job situation, we need to get more high-paying jobs within the city limits or close by, so that we can take some of these people off the roads and they have more time with their families.
Okay. And then for the broader Contra Costa County, would you say the job distance and affordable housing are also your top priorities?
I would say they are, but I think homelessness prevention is something that we talk about, we touch on it, but we're so focused on homelessness specifically that I think the prevention part of it could use some more attention. And I think at a state level too, I mean, even in my day job, I'm seeing things that where if an older adult was in the hospital and is now sent home but can't afford in-home care, so they have to choose between paying their rent or their mortgage and the food and the in-home care, which is really expensive, that there are a lot of things that I think we are not considering when it comes to the causes of homelessness and the ways that we can prevent that. And I think so, absolutely jobs and affordable housing, but also in the prevention arena. Okay.
I'd be curious to know, what are some of your ideas specifically for homeless prevention?
I think, we talk a lot about rent control, and I think depending on the city, that's a good thing. It's not always the best fit by city, depending on what their funding is like and what kind of programs they have available. But I would love to see financial guidance and planning taught to a better degree in high school and in college, for that matter. I think some programs for seniors that maybe change the tax credits, because for senior on the senior end of things, we've got people living 30 years longer than their life expectancy was 30 years ago, and so people weren't necessarily planning the way they are now. And so you have people running out of money, and then what happens? And then you have people that their rents are raised. So I know of a community of older adults in a lower income apartment complex where the rents were being raised incrementally, legally, but by the time all these raises were happening, we had people ending up becoming homeless because they just couldn't afford it. They had limited income and they had impacted income that was restricted. So I think it's just a lot of looking at things individually. I think I'd like to see cities having a little bit more control when it comes to housing development and the affordability percentages that we can all implement. I think if we're talking about some of the housing that happens really close to transportation, that's great. I mean, a lot of people that want to live in a high-rise apartment that is close to BART, that's great. But for the cities that don't have the same infrastructure and transportation, for example, it doesn't make sense to force that high-rise when there isn't the transportation, because you're taking away parking, and families need parking if they're going to have cars to take them to jobs or take their kids to school. So in large part, so much of this to me feels like you need to let cities figure it out, like let them decide what works most for their residents, because not everybody in Contra Costa County has the same issues as Brentwood does. There's Walnut Creek is completely different, and Danville and Concord, we're all different. And I think we really need to be allowed to make some of these choices based on what we know are the needs of our cities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's so true, that homelessness especially isn't a blanket issue because there's so many different needs. But I do really want to highlight what you said about the financial literacy, or lack thereof, of financial literacy education. I believe that's also really important. And building off of that, what other things would you want to see for youth to prepare for adulthood?
I think there isn't enough attention being given to trade opportunities. And I think it's wonderful to encourage our kids to go to four-year universities. I think for so many, that's a path that's going to get them into a career that's going to sustain them throughout their lives and bring them all this fulfillment. It's wonderful. But there are a lot of kids who take different paths. And I think we need to lift those up as being really great alternatives, not as like a secondary, well, if you can't succeed, go do this instead. Make sure that people understand that there are alternate paths that are just as fulfilling and can still give someone a lifestyle that really supports their hobbies and their family members and travel and all those great things. And they should feel pride in that. I think that the institutions, like I said, are great for those people that have that ability to succeed to that degree. But there are a lot of people facing a lot of challenges that mean going to a university is just not going to be the right fit. We just really need to focus on some alternatives so people feel pride in those as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your perspective on that. Switching gears a little bit, I did want to ask you, how do you balance your government work with your nonprofit work, and what does a day in your roles, both those roles, look like?
It's kind of interesting. It's sometimes it's I'm not going to lie, it's very hard to find a balance. To have time to myself and my family can be a huge challenge, because I have a council meeting tomorrow, and this weekend I had a 500-page agenda to read, which I got on Thursday evening. And of course, you're supposed to be ready with it, with your questions and comments and all of the research that you have to do, and the questions that you pose to staff and everything you have to get ready for the meeting, which means that the weekends, when there's some of them go over 1,000 pages. So the weekends before a council meeting, there isn't a lot you can plan for your weekend. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, my nonprofit work is very demanding. It's nonprofit work, which is always demanding. And so the weekends need to be for rest. So you have to really think about not just the balance, but what you're willing to sacrifice. There are regularly meetings, events, council meetings, additional committee meetings that I have to go to as a council member, as a vice mayor, that take away from some of that time as well. So my day, I get up at 6 a.m. and then get in front of my laptop at 6:30 and start working on council emails to return them to residents who write to me, staff with questions. And then I move over to my work email and address those concerns, and then get ready, then go into work. And then it's definitely a balancing act, and it can be a real challenge. And I sometimes it can be disheartening if the change you're trying to impact isn't workable, or if people are, before I say this, I should preface it by saying, again, everyone has the right to speak up. Everyone should be feeling empowered to make public comments. But it can be hard to sit on the dais and be professional when someone is saying something that you know is not accurate. And we can't, as a Brown Act violation, it would be a Brown Act violation to speak back and to engage in conversation during public comment. We're not allowed to do that. So there are times when people say things to us that we really wish we could educate them. And sometimes it's anonymous, or they just give their first name, so you can't connect at another time. It can be very disheartening. And nonprofit work can as well. So I think one of the challenges for me is to try and find those really good, powerful moments where I feel like I'm impacting things in a positive way. And that's for council or nonprofit work, because the work I'm doing during the day, that people, our staff, are seeing really challenging, sometimes cases of abuse and neglect, which can, that can be heartbreaking. And then for city council as well, you just have to find the moments that are motivating and figure out if you've got this line you don't want to cross when it comes to what you're willing to sacrifice and how much time you're willing to give, because it is a lot.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for your time and dedication. Even though I don't live in Brentwood, I think your constituents really appreciate your passion and your determination to serve them. So thank you for that.
I appreciate you, and I wish you all the best. And if you decide you want to get into politics, then I hope you'll do a great job with it. I'm sure you will if you're interested this early, because I certainly had no clue at that age.
Okay, my final question for you is, what is your favorite part about Contra Costa County?
I think probably the distance to everything. You've got, your San Francisco and your Monterey and your beaches and the mountains and the wineries. And I think you're kind of in the middle of everything. And I have to say, I love the culture that's coming into our county and into our cities for that matter as well. But we're bringing in, we're attracting people from a lot of different backgrounds and ages and religions and all these different diversities that is what makes us great. It makes us one of the best counties that, in the Bay Area, if not the best. I can say that, right? Just because I think that we're so much richer when we bring everyone and their experiences to the table together. So distance to all the really great things we can all do, and then the diversity that we're bringing, I think it's just great.
I agree. Contra Costa is definitely a very unique place to live in, and it's very special.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and for agreeing to do this interview.
All right. Thanks so much, Karlina. Take care and good luck to you.
Thank you. You too.